Clarke. Uh, I love the line at the bottom, the retiring CEO and managing director of CIMM. And I'm just going to make a very brief introduction here, if only my slides would go. Let's see here. There we go. To what we're going to do today. So after I give you this nice welcome, then I'm going to turn it over to Jon Watts, who's actually the incoming managing director of CIMM and has a variety of other titles and responsibilities. And he's going to give you a little overview of what we're going to talk about today. And then he'll turn it over to Alan Wolk, who'll talk about a new guide that Alan and Jon are working on right now, a guide to converged TV measurement providers, which is a lot of what we'll be talking about today. And then I'll come back and give you a little idea about kind of how some of the background as to how we selected the companies and to talk about in this guide and how it fits around this framework that we have called the building blocks for converged TV measurement. So I'm going to go off video, and Alan is also, and Jon will give you the overview here.
Great. Well, thank you, Jane. Thank you to everyone for attending. So it's a pleasure to be here. I am both excited and very slightly daunted to be stepping into Jane's very large shoes. But I know that with CIMM'S incredible membership and the support of various stakeholders, we are set for a fantastic next step for the organization. So our plan for today, today's webinar, as the title rather suggests, is to take a good hard look, essentially, at the future of TV measurement in the States. We're calling it converged TV measurement as we are in a converging market, clearly one in which TVs now provide access to a variety of different content offerings, both traditional broadcast channels, set-top box VOD services, stream services, and as a result, as everybody knows, TV measurement is having to adapt. The plan for today is to really unpack what's happening and set out some thoughts on how measurement will be adapting to this new environment. We'll talk a bit about the different types of converged TV measurement for content and ads in terms of how these fit together. We'll talk a bit about where the market is going and what providers need to do in order to provide robust measurement within this market environment. Jumping to the next slide. So what do we mean by convergent TV? I've sort of suggested this already. We are very much focusing on what we're calling premium content, so predominantly long-form, professionally made content, distributed across different platforms, but on televisions, including linear, VOD, digital video, CTV streaming apps, of course. Monetization of this content can obviously vary. It could be SVOD, it could be AVOD, it could be funded through a third-party mechanism such as branded content or something else. It's also worth saying that we're looking particularly and thinking particularly about how addressable in all of its many guises, whether it's server-side ad insertion or set-top box addressable, with locally stored ads, can be measured in this new environment. Jumping on. So given these changes that the market has been furiously keeping up to date with, or trying to keep up to date with during the last period, it's very clear that TV measurement is going to have to change one way or the other, even if we revert back to a single dominant currency provider, which I'm not sure anyone believes is that likely, but it's certainly possible. Why does it have to change? Well, addressable is clearly one of the fastest growing parts of the ad market. There are lots of debates over what proportional share of the market addressable will eventually account for, but it's clearly significant. And there are lots of industry efforts and consortium initiatives taking place to support the rollout and scaling of addressable, both locally and nationally. But addressable does require changes in measurement. We're still in this situation, possibly bizarrely, in which the C3 metric essentially averages all of the ad minutes in a program and looks at how they've rated. So addressable, which will require ad spot level measurement, as obviously we're substituting individual ads, will force change. It's also very clear that in a much more fragmented market, we're going to have to be making much more use of big data, of large granular data sets which provide much greater visibility than, say, a small scale panel or even a large scale panel about what's being consumed on what, by whom and where. So there's change coming. It's also worth saying that the landscape of companies trying to address this problem has proliferated. If you look for companies who claim to be providing some sort of measurement, it would be very excusable to come away somewhat confused. We are very much distinguishing between companies providing something called attribution, which obviously implies measurement. But on the other hand, we're looking at companies, and our focus for this study will be on companies providing some sort of currency grade total market measurement of a converged TV audience. And that will be our focus. So I'm going to hand over to Alan now, who's going to tell us a bit about the study and what we're really hoping to achieve through the review. Alan, over to you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John, and welcome out there. So what we're doing is we're creating, as John mentioned, this guide to converge TV measurement providers. It's really to clarify the differences between the companies. So, once you get past Nielsen, there are a lot of different companies which all do really cool things, but it's tough to sort of screen all of them and to understand what it is they're actually doing, why it's important, and why it matters. And as both John and Jane have mentioned, we're at a point now where I think everybody in the industry is coming to a realization that, hey, this duality, this sort of reality we have now where people are watching both linear and streaming, which are not delivered or measured in any way remotely the same way, that's the reality. It's going to be the reality for the next 10, 15, 20 years or longer. And we have to figure out a way to measure this because we can't just rely on one or the other and hoping that they'll come together. Fortunately, there are a lot of companies that have set their goal to make that a possibility, and we're going to be looking at what they do and how they do it and how many people they do it for and all those sorts of things. So we'll get into that in a second. So we're sending out this RFI to a bunch of audience measurement companies to sort of really understand and do a deep dive into what they do to set up a comparison. So we'll have the final report, we'll have charts as well as in-depth profiles to really explain what it is that these companies are doing, how they do the measurement, what's good, what's bad, what clients they're currently working with, what makes them different than other companies, so that somebody who's trying to figure this out really has a nice guide to look at and go, okay, now I get it. Now I see how this all fits together. So let's go on to the next slide. And this is just a housekeeping slide. So we've just launched it. We're going to be putting it out and it should be ready. We're doing a TV measurement and data summit on the 16th and 17th of February next year. So right now, the finalists have been identified and we've sent out RFIs to them. And now we're just waiting for them to get back to us so we can start writing the report. So in the next slide, here's what we're asking about. So big question is, what are your data sources? Where are you getting your where are you getting your data from? How big are your these data pools that you're using? How long do you have permissions for? All that. Cross-platform capabilities, that's the big one that we're talking about. Can you measure both streaming and linear? How are you handling that? How are you deduplicating people that that are watching both and sort of figuring out, okay, this is the same household. How are you factoring in things like over the air? How are you factoring in VOD, God, this is going to always screw this one, MVPD VOD, that's a lot of letters, and and even DVRs. Timeliness, how quickly are you getting your measurement? Are you getting it, like 2 seconds later, or do you have to wait 2 weeks? That's become a big factor now. How are you handling person level data, right? Most Nielsen's has that. A lot of the other, there's a bunch of startups, some of which are being sued by Nielsen, who have that as well. And how are you integrating that in to get from household level data to person level data? And then what are your unique capabilities? What do you do that everybody else doesn't do? And why should you be the winner here? Why should you be somebody that the ultimate audience for this goes to? So that's really what we're getting into, to sort of make it easy for people who read the guide to understand what all these companies do, what they do in relationship to each other, and then finally, what their end product looks like and how it all fits together. So hopefully we'll get some good answers. We're going to be updating this guide as needed because as we know, this industry changes, almost daily. And so there's going to be a lot of things that expand, things people need to adapt to, different rules and regulations, technologies, things like 5G that are coming out at some point. So it will be updated as needed. And of course, it's going to be available at no charge from the CIMM website once it's completed. And we're going to have the CIMM membership review it as well. So it's not just me and John guessing at this stuff. We'll have a whole panel of experts backing us up. So with all that said, I'm going to stop talking now and turn it over to Ms. Clarke.
And just to kind of reiterate what Alan was saying there, we have a committee at CIMM that's working on this project with Alan and John, and they've been extremely helpful already. And just to give a teeny bit of a background then about sort of why CIMM focuses on these kinds of areas is that, we've been doing this for a while. We're an affiliate of the ARF. We're a neutral sort of R&D coalition in this cross-platform video ecosystem that's been focused, for a long time on how to bring more granular measurement to TV, how to pull that into complete, converged TV or cross-platform measurement, whatever you want to call it. And this is also kind of heading into, kind of future trading platforms, these data-driven platforms where you can optimize, activate, and evaluate kind of on the same set of data. So CIMM, all of our initiatives and committees are all kind of around these areas. This is our membership, and our role in the industry is this community to bring kind of transparency, confidence, best practices into this area of measurement. And we actually have already up on our website available, for free, some papers that are related, best practices in combining smart TV and set-top box data, which I'll show you a couple slides from. We also did a couple of years ago a guide to TV attribution providers, and we have an upcoming identity resolution providers report. So now, CIMM'S always had kind of a roadmap or a vision, a framework. We've called it different words over the years as to how we look at this. And this was actually created way back in the beginning, 12 years ago with Unilever when they were a member. And it's basically says that, when you go from sort of a single media measurement into cross media measurement, you need entirely new tools for planning, for understanding the audience, and especially now by audience segment rather than just potentially, age and gender. And then you need these counting tools, the audience measurement tools, to get to the deduplicated reach and frequency. And to do that, having comparable metrics across all the platforms. And then this whole emerging area as well, which has grown a lot in the last few years, of how to evaluate the impact then to get the KPIs, the attribution. This is, a kind of a step beyond the media mix modeling that has been around for years and more akin to, the digital attribution that has gone on in the digital ecosystem for years. And as I said before, a lot of these forms of data and forms of measurement are being put into data platforms where you kind of can do this all on a platform and more in real time. And just to make sure that we fully understand this, because this guide that we're producing is actually about the companies that are doing the audience measurement in the middle of that diagram, the counting. So the audience measurement then is the net count of the deduplicated ad impressions, or the reach measurement, average frequency for demo or advanced audiences, often used as a currency. It can be refined, particularly in the digital space, by like viewability metrics, metrics to guarantee there's no fraud as well. And this is the characteristic of this kind of measurement is that it's projected out to the whole population. There's a reach model. You're looking at the entire campaign, the entire population of people who saw the campaign or who saw a piece of content. Additionally, they're planning and optimization tools, which can be a variety of data types and tools that are used to create the target audiences and to optimize them in the campaign. And then the back end, which I was just talking about, the attribution measurement, which is more at a very granular sort of individual or household level, where you're looking at, the contribution to specific KPIs for each of the TV impressions, and in here you want to actually use the sort of incrementality or lift measurement, as a best practice. And as I mentioned here, the key difference between audience measurement and attribution is the sort of presence of data science models that help to combine these building blocks that I'll talk about and project them out, you know, in a reach model to the entire population. This helps them to, you know, they have to have methods to account for incomplete data. So this is the big reveal. These are the building blocks. Many of you who are CIM members will have seen these before, but I'll go into a little bit more detail about each one. So I'll just do a brief summary here. You know, the first one is obviously the TV data. You know, we need to have kind of as nationally representative, as scaled as possible. But you don't need all of it. You know, there are many uses of data science to fill in gaps, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. The census, and you'll never get all of it, by the way. And you don't want it, it's too much. The digital census data is actually, you know, real time, but it's a very complex ecosystem right now and needs some more standardization. The third is the method to assign the person's data. All of this machine data doesn't tell you who's in front of the television, how many, you know, for the co-viewing factors as well. And it's often missing, you know, there are gaps in terms of like over-the-air viewing and other biases. And then the last building block, very importantly, is the ID resolution, which is the glue, you know, that holds all of this together and needs to be resolved between households, individuals, and devices often. And then I just, you know, put at the bottom, plus data science. You know, data science is playing a bigger and bigger role in all of this and in the ways that all these companies are putting all this together. So let me just dive a little deeper into each of the building blocks. So in terms of the scaled set-top box and smart TV data, you can refer for more detail to this report that's actually on our website. It's the problem with these reports is they get out of date as soon as you write them. And so we're actually doing an update to this report right now. But it's all about, you know, combining smart TV and set-top box data and creating sort of what's often been called federated data sets of these data so that you can make them nationally representative and as scaled as possible. And so, you know, each of these data sets has their own biases. You know, MVPDs have geographic biases. Each OEM has their own footprint and sort of their own demographic. You know, the audience that bought that particular TV set. So, you know, the good thing about set-top box data is it has a very deterministic household relationship. You have a subscriber relationship, a billing relationship. And so, you know, it's very good, solid data to link to other data sets. Smart TV data, you can also link, and it's not that much worse, but you're going through IP address, which is just less stable and has more links. You have to go from the IP address then to the household data to get the household composition data. And also the smart TV data is getting, you know, it's getting better and better all the time. It can provide live and now even can do some, you know, VOD, DVR. It can do CTV tuning in real time. It still has some challenges IDing the streaming source. The set-top box data represents more TVs per household typically, you know, than is available through any single ACR provider. But then on the other hand, as we've all been watching, you know, pay TV homes are in decline and they have a particular demographic profile now, you know, that's getting older. Now the ACR data, you know, at the glass, it's often called, is more future forward, particularly because it measures streaming. And so there's a lot of, you know, data science applications being put on top of this to try to improve any of the weaknesses. But obviously this would be much better if we had more than just, you know, potentially two. I mean, Vizio and Samba are the only ones that license their data openly in this market. All of the other smart TV OEMs have chosen to use that data for their own ad sales businesses. And so, you know, in terms of measurement, it would be better if we could have more of this great data. These are a couple of updated charts that are going to be updated in that report that's on the website, providing the sort of underlying data, both from the MVPDs on it's my left. I'm not sure if you're seeing that, but the MVPDs on this side and the OEMs on the right side of the screen there. And then the next slide shows a variety of companies that are then sort of integrating and combining different sources of these data and trying to use them for various, measurement purposes. And you'll recognize here some of these companies are then the companies that we're going to be talking to as we get to later in terms of putting together all the pieces for cross platform, converged TV audience measurement. So then the second building block, the digital census data, it's a very complex, flow of ad and content exposure data that moves across the digital video and the app ecosystem. And often up until now, people have just said, use the best available data. But we think that there needs to be some more standardization as you start to combine this. So you have data coming from sell-side ad servers, from buy-side ad servers, from DSPs and SSPs, and then you have, content and ad analytics companies. And what happens is because it's captured in so many different ways that the data aren't standardized. Ad servers capture this sort of point in time measurement using pixels and tags. And Adobe, one of the top content measurement software, or SDK, I suppose I should say, captures heartbeats. But those are implemented differently depending on like how many heartbeats you pay for, And Conviva, actually, a newer company, has not newer in terms of its existence, its ultimate existence, which has been around for a while, as a quality of service measurement SDK. But they've just been introducing standardized continuous second by second measurement because they're already measuring that, for quality of service. So there's hope that some of these, there's a way to create some standardization in this area. And what needs to be standardized then is a uniform impression qualifier. What happens now is you have, 1 second with 50% in view, or up to 5 minutes, maybe a qualifier in television. And then the metrics aren't even common. A lot of these applications, are reporting back video starts or video completes, or maybe 25%, 50%. Some are doing actual duration. And then additionally, they often don't use standardized ad names, and that creates a real problem when you're trying to put together and track a campaign across platforms. So the third building block in terms of having a method to assign persons, data, and data gaps, this is primarily being done through panels. Obviously, we have the big Nielsen panel, and then we have the two other, upstarts, startup panels that are, of course, as Alan just mentioned, being sued by Nielsen, unfortunately. But then ComScore even has a proprietary model that does not use a panel. Some of that was created off of panel data, but they've, figured out more how to model it. And so there are a variety of different ways to do this, to bring in the data that are missing. But what's clear is that panels are just not going to be the centerpiece of future audience measurement solutions. The media usage is too fragmented. As John mentioned earlier, the addressable measurement kind of breaks the panel, because you can't really do addressable measurement in a panel. And so the large TV and digital data sets are becoming the centerpiece of the new solutions going forward. Doesn't mean that the panels don't have a very strong role. They can be used for, the person's assignment, the co-viewing, adjusting the missing data. The issues with the panels, which we even learned more about, during COVID, that they really aren't truth sets as they've been called. It's hard to actually get a truth set when we really just have a lot of different data sources, each with strengths and weaknesses. And panels are another input. They can have high non-response rates. They can have low compliance with whatever activity you need to do to check in to show that the people are in the room in front of the TV. And there's a big question about, how big do they really need to be to do these, to fulfill these roles in a measurement service, rather than to be the measurement service. And so then our last building block here is identity resolution. Oh, I just realized there should be a 4 there. So, these are the glue that link all of this together, and they're very important, typically based on some form of household or device resolution to some underlying form of PII, like a phone number or an address or email address. And so there are a bunch of different commercial industry graphs. There's been efforts to come up with, standardized industry graphs. And then there are also a number of proprietary ID graphs. Everybody, now you turn around and everybody's got an ID graph. And so given the variety of all the identity providers, and many of them each bring, different very valuable pieces to this, the question becomes, how can you standardize some of the ID solutions, or at least make them interoperable so that you can connect data sets using these different ID graphs? So that's a big issue right now. And also some more transparency in how these different providers are accounting for missing data, missing device IDs and IP addresses. CIMM'S doing a big project in this area now in terms of what happens, when you match set-top box and smart TV data to all of these different ID providers, and what gets left on the cutting room floor. Are there biases as you move through this data matching process? And we're trying to dig into that a little deeper. Then, as we all know, there's privacy regulation issues around identity. We don't quite know exactly how this is all going to play out in the US here. But, set-top box data is household based. They've worked out privacy compliant methods using data safe havens, like Experian, to provide the data, for all of these use cases. Smart TV data goes through the IP address. There's been questions about whether IP address may become a piece of PII. So there are some issues that are all, up in the air here, and also whether a household is kind of enough of a unit that you can. It's not like individual privacy is being is becoming an issue, and and some of the other industry solutions having to resolve privacy to a segment level. So may take it away from the kind of creepiness of the individual level. So there are a number of open issues here, but I think most people in the US market are pretty confident that we'll figure out some way to use this, and we'll be able to still link data using these ID providers, just depending on what level it's done at. And so that's why it's still really a hugely important piece in terms of measurement, as well as in terms of advertising and marketing and audience creation. So the focus of the guide, as we've mentioned, is on the companies now that are putting together all of the building blocks. And so there's a growing number of them. And so these are the ones that we've determined so far, as we've just started this process, that we're going to include in the guide. Things may change as we go through and learn more about some of the different capabilities, because as has been said already, this is a very fast moving space, and a company that once only did attribution all of a sudden develops a reach model, and now they're doing audience measurement. So we're starting the process with these companies who are pulling together either content or ads, with sort of all those four building blocks. And then additionally, there are companies that are also pulling together all the building blocks, but they're primarily doing it for multi-touch attribution or converged TV attribution. And additionally, they could change tomorrow, but right now they're not doing the kind of audience measurement piece, but they're still providing very valuable data and services here. And so where the industry really is now is this state of kind of test and learn, where, because there's so many alternatives now emerging, media companies and agencies are often testing providers, in a confidential way within their own houses, and comparing them on different criteria. And these are some of the criteria that have been used to make these comparisons and do these tests. So what is the speed of their reporting? How long does it take to get the data and to do all this combinations and all the data science? And what's the depth of coverage? How many, how far can they get across all the different pieces in this complicated converged TV ecosystem? Then how is their ability to link the device, the person, and the household event level data to get to the deduplicated reach? What's their process for doing that? And how does it work? How does it potentially compare to other methods that marketers may be using? There's also whether or not these new measurement services can take in advanced audiences, because as has been mentioned here, we're moving away from just age and gender. Marketers have created through their own first party data, they've created their own audiences that they would like to target. Agencies are creating, huge data stacks where they're trying to then also help their clients create other kinds of audiences to target, maybe prospect audiences. And so these new measurement solutions have to have the ability to ingest that and take that data in and find those audiences and count and do all the analyses against those audiences. And then there's also a criteria of, what is the model for doing the person's assignment? There's been an argument in the industry for years about, oh, maybe household is just enough. Do we really need to get to individual? Digital has been doing individual measurement. TV has been doing individual person's level measurement through the Nielsen panel. So the industry's used to that. So, most people are saying that you really do need to have a way to get to the person's assignment and to get to the co-viewing, to also add in additional people in the household to really get that full reach number. And then one last issue, which is something that CIMM'S been on a tear about ever since the beginning, is that we don't really have common ways to identify ads and content in a uniform manner across the whole industry and across converged TV ecosystem. So ad ID, I have to give a shout out and applaud NBCU for adopting ad ID, is required for all their ads in their streaming services, possibly even back in the television side of the business. Also, it'd be great if every media company did this. It would make the whole system and all of the vendors in the back end who do the analytics a lot happier. And additionally, content identification has always kind of taken the second place here, but that's also important because the ways that the programming data gets added onto this big data is kind of complicated now. You either have to take the log files from the network, so you have to get the schedule data, and often the as run data doesn't get to the schedulers, and there's changes all along the way. So getting to accurate content measurement with everybody calling the piece of content the same name is harder than you might imagine. So a big shout out. IDER is a standardized content identifier that could be the Rosetta Stone between everybody's individual content identification systems. So we shouldn't forget about that. So this is how everybody may feel. I have to end on sort of a light note here that with all this kind of change and transition and seeming chaos in the industry, it does seem a bit like we're changing cars while on the move. But if they can do this in the Fast and the Furious, there's no reason why we can't also do it here in our converged TV measurement ecosystem. So we will be happy to take questions from the audience. And I don't know if Alan and John want to come back on the screen, and sure, we can just find some things to riff about if there are no questions from the audience. But do we have questions?
There seems to be one. It says, when will presentation from Hadassah Gerber, when will presentations be shared?
Oh, what we'll do is after this webinar, once we get the Zoom recording link back also, we'll send that to the attendees along with the presentation.
Okay, and then we have
it could be by tomorrow. Sometimes it takes Zoom a couple hours to get the link back.
Gotcha. And then we have one just in from anonymous attendee who asks, Aside from the measurement of reach and frequency across platforms, will creative evaluation metrics like ad recall, brand linkage, message recall, ad likability, etc., be looked at as part of the criteria CIMM is looking into for the guide?
Well, you guys can also step in, but I would say no, actually not.
Yeah.
That is a whole, very interesting area of research. Actually, in the role that CIMM plays, kind of within the ARF, we tend to focus on, it's the sort of fast moving, evolving TV and converged TV ecosystem. And the ARF, I will say, I'll give a shout out to them, does a lot of work, in creative testing and ad recall testing, and they have a lot of good information in that area. So I would urge you to follow up with them on that. But I don't know if John or Alan, you want to say anything else?
Yeah, just exactly what you said. I mean, it's like we can't boil the, they're interesting metrics. We just can't boil the ocean with this report. So we're focusing on actual sort of reach frequency measurement versus the sort of more subjective creative criteria. Moving on, we have a question from Joe.
Oh, wait a minute, just one last thing. Actually, let me also mention one last thing, which is that one of the good things that we're going to do in this guide is we're going to make an introduction that shows the landscape of kind of all of the companies in this ecosystem. It probably won't extend as far as to creative testing, but it will talk about some of these other areas that we've talked about, like the underlying data sources, the attribution companies. Even we'll just lay out sort of the landscape of these different companies, but then the deep dive part of the report will be on the companies that are actually trying to do the actual counting, the audience measurement, the deduplicated, converged TV reach measurement.
Okay. So Ivor Millman asks, forgive me for being unkind, but how far will you be able to go to check what the companies claim to be able to do? Well, John is British. His ancestors had this rack that they used to use in their castle, and we were going to put some of the founders on it and just sort of crank it to get the right answers from them. I mean, seriously, we will check with the CIMM, the CIMM committee, and say, hey, if something doesn't sound right, and then go back to them and ask them for verification. And if they still cling to that answer, there's not much more you can really do.
So yeah, and to build on what Alan said, obviously we want to make this guide as accurate and up to date as we can possibly manage. I think we're aware that there are in many cases big differences between what companies are currently doing and what their future roadmaps look like. So we will certainly tease out those differences and be very clear about what is currently in place and available versus what will be available in the future. As Alan said, the process itself we're going through has 3 stages. So we will be circulating a detailed information request, which is just being finalized at the moment. We will then, once we get the responses back from the companies, which will all be hopefully in the same format and comparable, we will interrogate those written responses, working with some of CIMM'S members, and we will then be going back to the companies to run depth interviews and to have further discussions just to kick the tires and ask for some clarification on any outstanding issues. So that's as far as we can go at this stage. There are clearly other things that other companies are doing, and we will certainly talk about some of those issues and other fact-checking things at a later date. But I think for this exercise, we want to get something publicly available that provides a comparative analysis with a reasonable amount of tire kicking. As we would say, the rack hasn't been used, I'd just like to clarify, in the UK for a few centuries now, but I'm pleased to say that it has resonated widely.
Yeah, no, let me also just add to that too, is that CIMM'S done a lot of these kind of reports, and what happens is usually, we have committees of CIMM members, many of whom are the ones also being interviewed too, and their competitors. And so they are pretty quick to point out when they think that something, is just like not really getting the full picture. And it's not as if we're trying to, I want to correct a little bit of something that Alan may have said earlier about what's good and what's bad. We're not really trying to kind of point out winners and losers here. We're trying to get to what are the capabilities of all these companies, and many of them are evolving very rapidly. And so it's more of a matter of kind of continuous improvement. And what are the, companies themselves often get more out of this process, because as they've been learning through all the RFIs that they're going through in the industry, is that when they see what it is the clients are asking for and what it is that they want, it helps companies to move to the next level of their own internal development. So this isn't meant in any way as, like a winning a contest or a bake-off right now. It's really trying to understand everybody's capabilities and how the whole industry can move forward to create these better measurement tools. We're not trying to find one company at all that is doing everything. It's really to just better understand all of the different capabilities and how each of them can move forward to continue to improve. And one last thing is that many of the individual media companies I mentioned are actually doing their own internal tests of the companies, and each of them may have slightly different criteria that they're looking for. And, CIMM would love to do a study like that. And there's no telling that we might not do something like that after this as well. Usually those are done in a blinded way, so that what you're understanding is not how particular companies might have met a certain criteria, but how companies with certain characteristics, met certain criteria. So it's more about the different capabilities and how the different pieces can be put together, and what the industry can learn about, what are the best ways to put them together, which may vary by company. So, may vary by the end user. The end users may want slightly different things from some of the different companies and the different services. So I hope that helps, Ivor. Hi, Ivor. Always has good questions.
Okay, and we have another one from an anonymous attendee, which is a long one. So what is the rationale for why converged television advertising requires marketplace-wide, quote, currency grade, unquote, measurement versus other advertising marketplaces, search, social, retail marketing, etc., that have survived/thrived without such a solution, question mark. In other words, what makes the converged TV marketplace different from other advertising marketplaces? Well, on this,
that's a really good question.
Yeah.
And Jon, you may want to jump in. It's a little bit what we were talking about before, that the definition of currency is really just whatever two companies decide to trade on. And it's moving even more in the TV space, as it has been in some other areas, more towards outcome-based measurement. And, it may be that we will not have one currency. I think what we mean by currency grade is just that it's kind of high quality, and that the counting is done in a way that buy side and sell side understand it and agree on it. But we may be moving to a world where we have even possibly more than one method of counting, if the buyer and the seller agree to it. And definitely, more than one method of trading. That if someone wants to trade on how many visits you sent to my website, or how many people you sent into my showroom, or you sent into my store, that could happen going forward. So, I do think it's a transition time, and a lot of these issues, will be talked about on stages like this for a long time to come. But do you want to add to that, Jon?
Yeah, I think the only other thing I would say is that the great difference in the between the TV market and the online market is concentration versus fragmentation. So as everybody who picks up any of the recent agency reports or spend reports, the online ad market is becoming very concentrated. And, with Google and Facebook capturing a growing share of spend, the need for solutions in that space has been rather different. The TV market, by contrast, is relatively fragmented, becoming a little bit less so with some consolidation, but it's still a fairly fragmented place with a really wide variety of different services, MVPD platforms, smart TV platforms, and so on and so forth. So the need for a currency which allows you to trade across multiple media owners or inventory pools is quite pressing. There's very few advertisers who solely choose to spend with one inventory owner or one platform or one media owner in that space. So you need something which supports some degree of comparability. would certainly be a view. Alan, I didn't see anything to add.
Yeah, I will add the fact that, we've always done it that way is a really strong motivator, and a reason why people don't shift. And, it made sense back in the day when there were just 3 TV networks to have a single currency. And even as things change, people are loath to give that up because they're just used to it. So there's a lot of that going on as well. Anyway, moving on to the next question here from the same anonymous. Will participating providers be provided a draft for comments prior to publication? Jane?
Wait a second, can you repeat that? I was actually just doing something here.
Oh, sorry, it says, will participating providers be provided a draft for comments prior to publication?
Typically that has been done, actually. So I think it's, it's just a matter of kind of the back and forth between you guys and the vendors. Usually that has been done just to make sure that everything that they've written has been understood. There's often an interview, like say might fill out the form and then you guys are going to do some interviews with them. And I think clearly that could be a part of the process.
Okay, good. I'm just skimming down here. I'm gonna try not to mess up your name. Vijay Gopala Krishnan asks, who would be the audience for the final guide, and what use cases do you expect them to use this guide for?
Well, I actually think that it could be, quite a wide variety of people in the industry. I mean, I've had people come to CIMM'S since we've done guides like this before and just say, hey, do you have a guide? Like, we don't even know about all these companies. Like, who are they and what do they do? And how does this work? So it could be anybody from, non-measurement people in all of these different companies, salespeople. It could be, I even think that, the people who know a lot about this as well, will want to use it as kind of a reference, and that's why it would have to be updated more frequently. But I really think it could have quite a wide audience. I mean, that's my thought. I don't know if you guys have more to say about it, but that's sort of originally how it came about, was people coming to us and saying, do you have, even people who were measurement people come in and say, hey, do you have a comparison of all these companies? Like, there's a lot of details about what each one of them do, and can you just put it on a piece of paper for us? And every media company is doing this themselves, and many agencies and marketers are also doing it themselves. So I think to have it done in one place in the industry, we're sort of all looking at the same conclusions or the same descriptions, will be helpful. And we're very happy to take lots of input and feedback on it, and we'll make a version 2 and whatever version 3 if there are areas that are constantly changing or people feel need to be corrected.
Okay. Nicholas Franceschi asks, have you found media partners are more or less responsive to having a marketplace standard created for data sharing and measurement?
Media companies being open to a standard. He might need to give a little bit more information here, but yes and no. So I do think there has been some hesitancy if you're talking about the big TV networks, sharing all of their app data in a way that's common. There has been some fits and starts in that process, and they haven't always adopted the SDKs from the big measurement firms, and many of them have these different solutions now. But I do think that they are starting to understand that the buyers would like to see, as John was just saying, no one usually buys, a buyer doesn't buy a campaign from just one network typically, unless it's a big tentpole event, like the Olympics or some event. But typically they're buying a campaign that goes across the whole TV ecosystem of all of the big companies. And so they would really appreciate, having some comparability in these metrics, especially in the digital metrics, where it really has been just the best available metric, and each company puts forth their own. So, you can't force people, but I think the buy side is requesting that.
Very much. I
think-
mean, there's a quote from, sorry, Joe, a quote from Ben Franklin, attributed to Ben Franklin, which says, we must all hang together, or surely we shall all hang separately. Which is sort of what's happening, right now, that buyers are not happy about how difficult it's become to plan across all these different companies, and as a result, they're putting pressure on them. That said, no one's really sort of said, okay, I'm going to give up my walled garden, but they're kind of realizing, yeah, we need to all start collaborating more.
I think as well, Alan and I have been completing some work as part of the TV data initiative, which we're both working on, with Jane as one of our expert advisors, along with another group. And one of the things we've been looking at is the opportunity and practicality of standardizing some of the business processes and workflows that support data onboarding, commingling, and so on and so forth. And there's clearly considerable appetite for it across different parts of the industry. I think the big question and debate is about the practicality of what will be both valuable and meaningful, and relatively easy to execute. But it's certainly something we're looking at. I'm not sure it falls quite within the scope of this particular study, though.
Okay, I'm just looking.
I'm looking through some of the other questions, and Shaylee, yes,
Please.
we love the IAB. We love a lot of what the IAB is doing here. You can play a really big role here. Metrica, yeah, just reach out to us separately for, if you're a company. This isn't really an RFI, so it's really like, an RFP or an RFI. It's more like I guess it is an RFI, but it's not to actually end up with to be commissioned to do a service, a piece of work is what I'm saying. It's not an RFP. So, we're always happy to learn about new companies and new capabilities, particularly things that can come from Europe and come over here, or from other countries and come here. So we're always interested in listening to that. But right now we're looking at companies that can do this in the US now and what their roadmap is.
I think there's another anonymous attendee question, which is just about what might be commercially sensitive and not suitable for publication in the public domain versus what we can release. It's a really good question. And I think one of the things we're expecting to find as we submit our information requests and engage with the companies is what they are prepared to make public. Clearly, if there is quite a lot of information out there, we know certain things, but we may well find that there are certain elements of their processes, methodologies that they're not prepared to share, and we will cross that bridge when we come to it. I think generally, our view is that the more information we can get out there without giving away trade secrets or proprietary, insight into methodologies which companies don't want to share, then the better. So there will be some secret source elements we can't share, absolutely. I'm sure we'll find that.
Yeah, and as I said, we've done this before with lots of different companies, and usually there's some kind of a compromise so that you can share some amount of information that helps people to understand what you're doing without, giving away the barn, as they say, or the store. Let's see. Okay, yeah, good point from Betsy about everybody doesn't want to accept tags or pixels. So we'll see if we can address that. Let's see, someone says, would you have an idea of a time scale to reach a nirvana of cross-platform standardized measurement for the whole video ecosystem? Do you think we'll get there even if there are multiple accepted solutions? Great question. Your guess is
if we knew that.
I think one interesting thing the study will have to deal with, which we've been talking to various parties about, is that different providers in the market have slightly different access to data. So Samba, for example, has access to certain data sets which various other parties don't have access to. And that's true for many of the big convergent measurement providers. So you'd expect there to always be some differentiation, some distinction between their outputs and what they say. It would be intriguing if they completely converged exactly, because obviously they're all having to make a set of assumptions from the data they have to get out to the level of the total market. And those methodologies are often quite behind closed doors and difficult to unpack. So yes, I'm pretty sure one will get to a nirvana of cross-platform measurement of a whole video ecosystem from various different providers. the extent to which, and there will clearly be multiple accepted solutions, I think it seems reasonable to assume, the extent to which the measurement data that they provide aligns, I think is a very interesting question. And certainly anecdotally from agencies, I think, who've been testing some of the different providers, there is quite a lot of discrepancy and divergence between them at the moment.
Also, we're just about getting near to the end here, but you know, there, as everyone knows, there's been a lot of initiatives coming from the WFA and the ANA and the marketers to get to complete, you know, cross media measurement for them, you know, which is deduplicating reach across all of the converged TV ecosystem, and then including Google and Facebook along with that as well. So I think that you know, there have been some designs of some ways to do this that have been put forth, and I think the TV industry is working to put together in these converged TV measurement systems, you know, sort of the way that they see this, and how to have this come together in a unified way for the TV companies that could then potentially be linked to some of those other data. And so I think, you know, getting to all of this is, I don't really think that there's going to be an end to one solution for all of this. It's a continual evolution that more media, new technology, it's all going to be added on. It's a matter of the industry becoming flexible to be able to keep adding and come up with some commonalities to make it easier to keep adding in the future. You know, it's kind of like, there's certain fluctuation, you know, points, like tipping points, where you have to really make a big change, and then it may just be incremental from that, and then other big changes. It's very hard to have a crystal ball into the future here.
Yeah, I mean, one big change we will be seeing is that digital delivery is going to be much, much more common, and that the new infrastructure bill is really going to make that possible for a lot of underserved communities as well, who currently rely on over the air and things like that. That it will hopefully it will expand broadband access nationwide in a much more significant way. So that will be a change. We'll see.
Yeah, no, really, the looking at it from a 30,000 foot point of view, this is all about the digitization of video content and all content, and how to keep measuring that going forward. There's one last question here, that the timing of the document, we're hoping to have this all prepared, you know, with vetting by the committee and everything, in time for CIMM'S annual. Now we're going to call it the Converged TV Data and Measurement and Data Summit. Every year we have in February. Used to be called the Cross-Platform Video Measurement and Data Summit, and we're actually changing the name to start a new decade of the summits. And with John there as the managing director, and I'll be retiring, so we hope to then launch this at that point in time. But thank you all so much for attending. Yes. John, do you have any last words?
No, I think the only thing which I know comes from both myself and Alan is that we would, I think more than ever, TV audience measurement is a team sport. And the more that we can get input and insights from everybody here and test and refine as we go, the better the guide will be. We want to create a really valuable public resource. And I think the thinking and work that Jane and Alan and myself are doing, plus that all of the various CIMM committee members have contributed to, is going to make it a really valuable resource, but it won't be perfect. And I'm sure we will continue to iterate it and refine it over the years ahead. So here's to creating something that hopefully will help the entire industry move forwards.
Cheers.
Thanks, and see you the next time.
Bye-bye.